Let's talk about one of trucking's #1 LTL carriers of all time. In my opinion, this is one of the best run companies I've ever heard of. Unfortunately, it was brought down by the Yellow Corporation, like so many other ones. I'm talking about Roadway Express. Well, Roadway Express, there was so much great information I found out about this. I've been working on this for a long time, so sorry for the long time in between the videos there, but we'll get right to it. So Roadway Express was actually founded in 1930 in Akron, Ohio, and it was founded by brothers Carol and Galen Roush. And they originally started the company to take tires, basically for the automotive industry. In fact, their first load was out of Akron, Ohio, taking tires to St. Louis. Yep. And the other interesting thing is they didn't have any trucks. They originally started with 10 owner-operators. I didn't realize that was an owner-operator company originally. What's astounding, and I can't figure out how anybody manages to do this, but it only took a few months, like within a year. The company had terminals in Atlanta, Baltimore, Birmingham, Charlotte, Indianapolis, New York, Philadelphia, Knoxville, Memphis, and Nashville. I'm not quite sure how that worked, and I could not find anything out to say how they managed to expand that fast with only 10 owner-operators. But by the end of World War II, the Roadway began replacing its owner-operators with its own employees. The reason for this is some of the other stories we talk about this, these companies you weren't able to buy trucks, you weren't able to buy parts, everything was for the war effort. So a lot of their owner-operators were not able to keep up on their equipment. And so Roadway decided to replace them, with their own employees. But it was the early 1950s when Roadway really started pushing its LTL model out to the world. They saw a big place for that. After the war effort, trucking was actually up 20% as opposed to railroad. Railroad was losing a lot of ground there, even despite the regulation that had gone into effect. The Roush brothers focused everything on good management. They were real picky about who their managers were, and they had to pretty much stick with their plan as far as finances. And we'll get into their unique way of financing things, or their unique way of keeping track of their finances and their profit and loss in a little bit, because it is really amazing. So in the 1950s, Roadway was able to borrow millions of dollars to expand its operations. But during all this time, there was a lot of friction between the brothers. And in 1956, Carol Roush sold his shares of the companies to the public for $5 million. I would imagine his brother probably could have bought him out, but no, he sold him for $5 million. And it actually says that this was just to piss off his brother. Basically, it was to make his brother mad. And Carol Roush then went on to purchase ONC Freight. Later that became Rocor, but that's another story, and it'll be done here at some point. Between 1958 and 1968, the number of terminals that Roadway had grew from 60 to 135, more than doubled its size. And but here's the interesting business method I wanted to talk about. That they had in place. And I don't know how many other companies did this. I've never heard of this being done before. I've always heard of companies being run as one big company. But Roadway had a very sophisticated accounting method. And profit and loss was broken down by the individual customer, the commodity, the weight, and the route. So they knew whether they were making money or losing money on each and every route, each and every customer, everything like that. So what this did was each terminal was able to adjust and make sure they stayed profitable. And it's because each terminal was its own profit and loss center. So basically, this big company of Roadway has 135 little companies in between, each run by its own manager, and bonuses paid to that manager based on what they did. So they had incentives to keep going, but they were able to track everything. So if a route didn't pay, let's say every day somebody's going out on a route, it's just not paying right, they either cut that route, raise the rates, do what they have to do. It really sounded like an incredible business model, especially for the time. I don't know, we always think, my age, we always think computers, and back then everything was done by, by paper. But here's another thing. Because of their tight finances and everything, there was a recession in 1974 to 1975. And Roadway was able to remain strong because of their tight finances and because they became debt-free in the early 1970s. Those millions that they borrowed in the 1950s, they were able to pay off by the 1970s. So by 1977, Roadway operated in all 48 states. Good thing they made it through the 70s, multiple truck strikes, things like that. But after deregulation, Roadway tried to market itself as a premium carrier. They said that they had the best routes. They said that they were the best carrier, and therefore they could keep their rates high. And, well, this didn't actually work. It didn't work. In 1982, Yellow and CF, Consolidated Freightways, passed them in the market share. Roadway was number one, and now Yellow and CF were number one. And this caused them, for the first time in history, to actually offer discounted rates on their premium freight. So in 1982, Roadway formed a holding company called Roadway Services Incorporated. After this, I will call them RSI, because that's what they went by. And obviously, Roadway Express was their primary company, their biggest subsidiary. But by 1984, RSI had acquired Spartan Express, Nationwide Carriers, and Roberts Express. I had actually forgot about Roberts Express. And being that my name is Robert, I used to love, when I was a kid, seeing my name on the side of trucks. I had actually forgotten about them. But, so in 1985, RSI's earnings slipped. But this wasn't necessarily a bad deal, because their reason for slipping is because they were going to double trailers. Roadway Express was going to double trailers. I didn't realize they only did that late. I just didn't know that. And the other thing was, Roadway Package Systems was started, and they used some of that money for the startup costs. RPS, of course, is been around for a while and actually still exists in a way today, but that's another story. But their main reason for starting RPS was to compete with UPS. And apparently they did pretty good with it. Through the rest of the 1980s, RSI continued to make acquisitions, including Viking Freight, which was a huge LTL carrier on the West Coast. Unfortunately, in 1989, RSI had to shut down Nationwide Carriers because they just weren't making a profit. And but by 1991, Roadway offered services to Mexico, Canada, and 20 European countries. That's pretty interesting. But here was something that really hurt Roadway. And I've seen this with other companies too. I remember this happening. But I was, I guess I would have been 15 years old. I remember going out on the road with my dad, and I remember this going on. But the 24-day Teamster strike of 1994 cost RSI $68 million, and it led to a lot of changes within the company. In August of 1995, RSI made Roadway Express its own company. And this is because they were the only unionized carrier. So basically, they lost $68 million as a whole. They wanted to make sure that never happened again. They didn't sell off Roadway Express. They just made it its own company. And then RSI changed its name to Caliper. And its subsidiaries were RPS, Roadway Global Air, Roberts Express, and Viking Freight. Now, Spartan had become part of Viking. I guess they had trouble making money with Spartan, so they made it part of Viking and showed a profit that way. So they wanted to make sure that strikes would not hold the company back as a whole. So if there was another big Teamster strike like that, which I believe that was the last total big Teamster strike like that, as far as I know, as of right now. But if that happened again, it would only hurt Roadway Express's profits, not RSI or what became Caliber. And all those companies that are part of Caliber, I intend on doing stories on in the future. Well, Roadway Express, out on its own in its first year in business, was a debt-free company, and it showed $2.2 billion in revenue and $21.8 million in profits. So despite others saying that it wouldn't work as its own company, it clearly was. And here's one of the reasons for it. And, you know, I love great people of trucking, men and women who really did great things for the industry. And this is one man that did. His name was Michael Wickham. And when they separated Roadway Express, they put him in charge as president and CEO. And apparently his whole career up until this point had been with Roadway. But now he was running the company. And Michael Wickham took extreme measures to cut costs. Like, he closed over 100 terminals, and he cut the administrative costs. There was a couple other important things that he did on a smaller scale, but he like changed their zones and things like that. One thing he never did, you hear me, Roadway executives? This is something, or yellow executives, you hear this? This is what he never did. He never asked the workers to cut their pay. Never. And in fact, he met with the Teamsters Union to work out a plan for cooperation over the next years. How they could remain profitable, but still stay cooperating and offer decent wages. Imagine that, a company working with the union to provide, you know, what's best for everybody. You hear me, yellow executives? Or former yellow executives with your big bonuses at home. Anyway, the result with all this, the actual result was Roadway had, you're not going to believe this, a 3% turnover rate, less than 3% turnover rate. That's unheard of anywhere, almost anywhere, but in the trucking industry, that has to be the best turnover rate of any company ever. If anybody knows of a better one, let me know, but I can't imagine. I think I heard one time that Swift, and this is just something I don't remember where I heard it from, but it's stuck in my head, is like 250 or 300% turnover rate each year. And Roadway was less than 3%. So imagine that. They have this great workforce. And when you have that kind of turnover rate, you also have great loyalty. So they're not only are they not training people, they actually have great employees working for them. Again, you hear me, yellow executives? Anyway, in April of 1998, with Michael Wickham still at the helm, Roadway and the Teamsters signed a 5-year contract. The contract gave a sense of stability. I mean, your job was safe. You know, for the next 5 years, you had that. And it did offer wages. It said small wages, wage increases and benefit increases, basically to, keep up with, the times, going. But it gave them that sense of stability. And they still remained at a minus 3% turnover rate. And that's when things all went bad at the end of that contract. So Michael Wickham stuck with the company until the end of that contract. And in 2003, he stepped down as CEO. And 4 months later, December 2003, Yellow Corp acquired Roadway Express and Reamer Express, a company that they had, a Canadian company they had previously acquired, for $1.05 billion. Ready to listen for the bomb? Yep. I don't have to go into too much detail from there. In 2009, the companies were combined as YRC Inc. And a couple years later, it changed to YRC Freight. And of course, in 2023, the company claimed bankruptcy. And it took down quite a few companies with them, Roadway being the biggest. Don't worry, USF guys, going to do stories on that too. Pretty much every company. I have a couple other companies. In fact, I think I'm going to put them all on a playlist. I'll put them up here above me. All the companies that they brought down that I've done so far, because I really, really am anti Yellow Corporation. I try to remain positive. I can't find anything good out about this company. And after seeing this awesome company, I mean, I got 4 pages of how awesome this company was, especially at the end. And Yellow Corp managed to take them over and ruin it all. A lot of guys commented when I was talking about Roadways, or when I was talking about Yellow, saying that they worked for Roadway and it was a great company until it wasn't after 2003. So another great company fallen, but man, great employees over the years. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, like and subscribe, and comment. Please comment. I get so many great stories from former employees of different companies, ideas for companies that people want to hear about. In the future, I do read every single comment I get, and I love them all. If you don't want to comment on there, or you want to send me an email, you can right down here. It's finchresources@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram under Trucking Resources. So, guys, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, and I will catch you on the next one.